It's so important to check your equipment before you jump into that first class of the day. I remember once teaching my full shift, 6 hours back to back, and at the end of it, I realised that my headset wasn't actually plugged into my laptop. I'd been using my inbuilt laptop microphone the whole time. This, to me, was mortifying because when I teach, every time I cough or if someone's been loud in the park outside, what I do is I press a little button on my headset to mute myself. So this is just one of the many things that could go wrong if you don't do a tech check. Now, rather than running that risk, I check absolutely everything before I start teaching. I check my headset and sound levels, my webcam and green screen. I check that my internet's working properly. I even check my mouse to make sure that it's not jerky or laggy or anything like that. So tech checks, do them every time, it could save you. If you love the sound of your own voice a bit too much, it might make your student want to say,
I do wish we could chat longer, but I'm having an old friend for dinner.
That's Hannibal Lecter. And this part's called Hannibal Lecturer. Lecturer, sounds like lecture, it's like a play on, like a pun. Anyway, when you start teaching, it's likely that you have this idea in your mind that teaching is the same as lecturing. It's easy for you to think that you should be talking and kind of pouring information into your student's head, right?
Grammar this.
Syntax that.
Sentence structure.
Listen to me.
I'm the teacher.
Write it down.
Take notes.
But actually, nah. A much more effective and progressive way of teaching is by facilitating learning. But what does that mean? Exactly, facilitating learning. What's that? Well, to me, it means giving the students a bit more freedom in the classroom and a bit more control of what goes on in the classroom, whilst also providing them with support and guidance along the way. Simply put, in short, in a nutshell, ask a load of questions. Have them feel free to have the space and freedom to just say what they want and talk about what they want sometimes. Let them speak their minds, let them open up to you a little bit. Now, it's not a therapy session or anything like that, but I think this kind of method is really effective in an online classroom. Be careful with this though. Remember not to take an overly laid back approach. And instead, always be listening out for mistakes and get ready to jump in and correct them wherever necessary. I'm not saying that lecturing is a dead art. Lecturing absolutely has its place in the world. I think personally that place is in a big university classroom with a professor in front of tens of students. Lecturing is kind of one of those things where, like a TED talk, right? Where a load of people are listening to an expert talk about a subject. And that's not really what's going on in an online English classroom, is it? A small class with 1 to 6 students in it. In fact, whether online or offline, I think that lecturing is a strange approach to take, and you should kind of facilitate learning and have a lot more freedom and give your students a lot more freedom in the class as well. It's tempting, isn't it? You make these little calculations in your head. If I teach 10 hours per day for 7 days a week, I'd have to do that for 4 weeks, 1 month, then I would earn... In your head, it sounds great. Once you've made those calculations, you kind of feel like you've already done it and that money's already earned. And guarantee after the first few days of all of those back-to-back classes and all of that hard work, you're going to start to regret it. Burnout isn't just a physically dangerous thing, because obviously, we get tired from lack of sleep and we just generally get unhealthy. But it's also mentally damaging at times as well. I find that, burnout can kind of sap that motivation and passion for what you do. It takes it all away from you. It makes you start to hate teaching online or, whatever you do. This applies to all different jobs, right? I've been there. I really have. I set myself this nice monetary goal for the end of the month and, tried to get it, and it just made me want to quit altogether. I just wanted to not teach anymore. I realized that my performance and my care in the classroom really started to deteriorate. And then teaching English, to me then, the thought of opening another classroom and sitting there and listening to the same mistakes that I've heard all day, all week, that thought made me want to slam my laptop shut, crawl into bed, hide under the covers, and just shut out the world for a week. I mean, that paints a pretty vivid picture, doesn't it? I can't be good for my mind. What I do now is I pretty much stick to a schedule that I know I can work with. If I do feel like doing some extra hours, then I don't go crazy. And if I feel like I need a break, I don't hesitate. I take time off. You've got to cut yourself some slack. And also, this is important, you've got to be careful not to become obsessed with making each paycheck bigger than the last. That's dangerous. Take it easy, know your limit, and enjoy what you do without burning out. It is possible. When it comes to teaching vocabulary, your mind might straight away go to, dictionary definitions, but that might not be as helpful as you think. While we're on this topic, translations aren't helpful either, in most cases. I remember when I started ESL teaching quite a long time ago now, and I was teaching Peruvian business people in Lima, in Peru, offline, not online, and their first language was Spanish. Even back then, my grasp of Spanish wasn't bad, so I found that I relied a lot on translating words, concepts, and even full sentences in the classroom just so that they get it, just to make it quicker. But it's not helpful. Direct translation might be okay for elementary vocabulary words, specifically concrete nouns, things that you can see and touch objects. Words like milk, chocolate, phone, cat. But outside of that, it starts to get complicated. If you directly translate a sentence, an idiom, a phrase, a phrasal verb, or pretty much anything other than a concrete noun, just one word, into another language, you could actually be saying something completely different. You might even be saying something proper rude, Not to mention the fact that most online English companies that conduct these classes don't want their teachers to ever rely on the student's first language. Not at all. And this is because it's about immersion. So if you do this, try to break that habit. I know it's quite nice, and I'll be the first to hold my hand up and say, this is how I sometimes feel. It's nice to show off that you're bilingual or trilingual and impress your students in that way. And often when you use the student's first language, they get a little bit excited and they're like, wow, oh, you can speak, Spanish, or you can speak Chinese. Yeah, I know that feeling. But for the benefit of the student, just try to hold off. Now, that's translations. I first mentioned definitions, so let's talk a little bit about definitions as well. I think that definitions are also a bit useless and, in fact, counterintuitive when language teaching. And I learned this the hard way after lugging a big dictionary around with me all the time when I was teaching in Lima. I used to ride on my bike or take the bus, and this big dictionary was really, cumbersome. And now when I look back, it just wasn't necessary, didn't really come in useful. The only time, if I'm honest, the only time that it did come in useful is if I was teaching a really high level student, maybe a lawyer, and they asked me what a specific law term meant. And, even as a native English speaker, I don't know all of the technical law jargon. So there are some cases in which it does come in useful, but for the most part it's useless, and let me show you why. A long, narrow, vertical structure made of stone or brick that surrounds or divides an area of land. A long, narrow, vertical structure made of stone or brick that surrounds or divides an area of land. What does that define? That's actually the dictionary definition of wall. Did you notice though that the definition for wall actually includes a lot of words that are more complicated than the word wall itself? It just confuses students more. And, try this out. Get a dictionary or look up a word online and read definitions for some basic words, and it's mental. The definitions are sometimes so complicated and so convoluted for basic words, and that's why it's not really effective. Alright, so if we're not relying on translations and definitions, how can we teach vocabulary and grammar and anything? Examples. Just use the word in a sentence, and the student will probably get it. She hung a picture up on the wall. William was upset because his daughter drew on the wall. We need to paint all 4 walls in this room. Can you see that By simply using the word wall in a sentence, the meaning becomes much clearer. To some extent, this is the same for things like grammar concepts. Make example sentences using the grammar rather than trying to explain the placement of the subject, the verb, the auxiliary verb, the object, and all that stuff. The goal is to make it easier to understand, especially at first when you're introducing a word or a concept. Okay, so I think this applies to all levels, more or less. But I think you will come across some exceptions as well. You might find some high-level students that appreciate being given complicated definitions of words or seeing the grammar rules and structures for different concepts in plain black and white. But every student's different, and how you do it is up to you. It's your class. Quick pause before number 5. If you're finding this content at all useful so far, please consider liking the video and subscribing to my channel for more content. Also, my Instagram is @iTutorJoe if you fancy following me there. Let's keep going. I can't tell you how many times teachers reach out to me every single day and ask me how they can do better. They ask me how to get better ratings, how to get better feedback, how to make students want to book them again, and so on. My answer is pretty much always the same because it's something I strongly believe in. Rapport. I might have emphasized this a lot in past videos as well, but it's never too much. I'm really going to try my best not to sound cliche in this section, because if you've done any kind of research in online teaching, you've probably come across something similar to what I'm about to say, but it is so important, and that's why you hear so much and read so much about it. Start your class with an infectious smile. Throw in a super warm greeting and just show genuine interest in the student. You can do this by asking them some specific questions about their jobs or their classes at school, or by sharing a little personal story or anecdote, or even just a thought, something that you know that they can relate to. Keep it light, keep it fun, and just for a little added bonus, try and get a little laugh or two out of them right at the beginning. It works absolute wonders. It really does. When I started, I put way too much emphasis on teaching English and not enough on making the student feel comfortable and building a rapport. When I think about it, I think at this point I have some kind of go-to starters or warm-ups for different demographics of students that I come across. For example, if I have a middle-aged intermediate student and I find out she's a stay-at-home mom, I'm going to talk about some tasty home recipes, or maybe get her thoughts or ideas on how to make sure kids behave well at home, some tricks you can implement there, things like that. Maybe even which house chores I prefer to others and get her opinion on the same thing. If I get a high-level teenager, I don't know, let's say 14, then I might ask them what their favourite superhero is. Or maybe if they seem a little bit more mature than that, I might ask them something like, you know, what would you do if you woke up in the morning and there's a zombie apocalypse outside? You know, something interesting, something that sparks a bit of energy in the class right at the beginning. Okay, I didn't put this one in my script, but I think I can't avoid it. Most people, when teaching English online, teach low-level young kids, right? So what do I do in that situation? How do I build a rapport there? For some teachers, this demographic is the easiest to build a rapport with. For me, I find it to be the most difficult. What I tend to do for young, low-level students is use a lot of effects or a lot of props, and maybe find something until I see a little spark in their eye. Maybe it was an ice cream. Okay, and I'll bring that back and I'll ask them about the ice cream, ask them short little yes/no questions about that, maybe pretend to eat the ice cream. And I find that I do a lot of kind of acting, and a lot of it is kind of slapstick, physical comedy, you know? Now I say that for me they are the hardest demographic to deal with, but even saying that, I find that I can pretty much, 95% of the time make these kids laugh at the beginning. And to me, that's the key to a fantastic rest of the class, right? If you can make the student laugh at the beginning, you're sorted. Actually, I'm interested, if you've made it this far in the video, let me know in the comments below what kind of demographic do you prefer teaching, and which one do you most struggle with? Let me know in the comments. So what I'm kind of getting at here, and this is a little bit strange, admittedly, is we kind of have a teaching persona. We kind of change our attitudes and the way that we talk to people depending on the people that we're talking to. I feel like making a whole video about this because it's a really interesting topic. Another time, maybe. It's not one size fits all when it comes to classroom vibes, I think. Just a little bit of extra thought and care into what this student, not a student, not any student, this student, into what this student wants or needs really goes a long way. Honestly, hands down, and I might not have said this maybe 4 months ago, but rapport is my #1 priority in the classroom. And that's it. 5 things for you to think about. Cheers.